Well, a very good morning again. Hello, my name is Vince Fosi. I'm a Vice President for Cyber, Space, and National Security Policy. I'm delighted to be back here on stage today and this morning with Deputy Secretary John Graves. He has held many prominent positions in both the public and private sectors over his career. In 2020, he was a counselor to President Biden's presidential campaign, and prior to that, he was head of corporate responsibility and community relations at KeyBank, and he also served in several key positions in the Obama administration. Good morning, Deputy Secretary. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I understand you're a fellow space enthusiast, and before we get into our questions, I would love to get your first thoughts on your excitement in the aerospace industry.
Well, I don't think there is a more exciting time for the space industry, particularly commercial space industry, than right now. As you and I were discussing before, we're both space enthusiasts. Both wanted to go to space at some point. I thought that there was never going to be an opportunity to do that, especially.
There's still a chance.
But that's what I'm saying. Now it looks like there's even greater chances going forward. So I'm excited about where we are, and hopefully with the good work of everyone here and others, we actually will get to a place where we can really drive the commercial space industry here in the U.S.
Absolutely. And before we get into the questions, just want to say thank you to you and the Secretary for your partnership with the Chamber and Suzanne and your commitment to facilitating global trade and U.S. leadership abroad. So thank you. And into our questions, first one, as public and commercial activity in the aerospace industry continues to increase, the administration has worked to delegate and update aerospace roles, responsibilities, and we had Commissioner Rosenworcel here yesterday talking about forthcoming rulemakings among the various federal agencies. How have you seen the Department of Commerce's role in the aerospace industry evolve over time, and what are some of your key priorities?
Well, it's a great question. Let me start by saying that we don't do this alone. We have great partners across the administration, like our partners at NASA, DoD, FAA, of course the FCC, TSA. This is, maybe for the first time in government's history, it is a one government approach to the way that we do this work. We know that the only way to uplift the commercial space industry is if we do this in coordinated fashion, and we do it in a way that relies on the expertise that's developed over decades in the private sector, not just relying on what we're doing in government. At Commerce, you all know for 30 years we've been the advocate within the U.S. government for the commercial space industry, particularly out of NOAA with our Office of Space Commerce. We're excited about the work that the Space Commerce team is doing. Richard Dalbello was just brought on not too long ago as our director. As you know, many of you I'm sure, he has a long career in the private sector, and there was a point of bringing Richard in. It's because he understands the opportunities of growing the commercial industry, and that it's really incumbent upon us to make it easier for industry to innovate, to develop new approaches, and for us to provide some broad guidance, but then to get out of the way. So the Office of Space Commerce, in addition to advocacy, is also, as many of you know, driving space situational awareness and space traffic management. Those responsibilities are being handed over from Department of Defense to Commerce. But it's not just the work that we're doing at the Office of Space Commerce. Our commercial remote sensing work that's being done by NESDIS out of NOAA is also absolutely critical for our understanding of Earth's environment, the understanding the issues affecting Earth through our remote sensing satellites. We also do a lot of work. We have 13 different bureaus. I'm not going to go into every one of the different bureaus. Suffice it to say, we cover everything under the sun through Commerce. But it's our Bureau of Industry and Security, which does the export controls, which helps to make sure that we're controlling technology so that our adversaries don't get access to or advancement beyond our capacity. It's our National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which is the President's lead, essentially, agency on spectrum management and the ways that we use our satellite technologies for driving telecommunications. It's also NIST, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, for standards and best practices development, helping to drive a sensible regulatory approach, one that is built off of data, science, and of course, the good input from industry.
You touched on some of the public-private partnerships, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper into them. Some of the numbers are just staggering on the investment in the commercial space industry. In 2021, $47 billion in terms of private capital investment, aspirationally working towards a $1 trillion global investment in the commercial space industry.
More than $1 trillion.
Oh, aspirationally, we'll get there. But how do you see the Department of Commerce working with private companies? You touched on remote sensing. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about some of the partnerships in action.
Well, the Commerce Department recognizes that we can't do this on our own, and we shouldn't be doing this on our own. It's absolutely crucial for us to do the types of things that enable the innovation, the creation of economic opportunity in the private sector. Some of it is built off of some of the things we just heard in the last panel, building the workforce for the future, and that's also driving research and development. So we do a lot of work to support advancement in STEM. In addition to the workforce development work that we do through our Economic Development Administration, we also are driving economic growth opportunities. So you think about the work that's being done in places like Texas and Florida with development of spaceports across the country. That doesn't happen in a virtual silo. It happens because people are willing to take a risk, but they can't do it if you don't have the right cooperative engagement, if you don't have a coalition of partners, if you don't have local, state, and federal resources aligned to support that growth. So that's what our Economic Development Administration is doing, providing funding to help grow this type of development. Just earlier this month, we announced as part of our Build Back Better regional challenge, $1 billion program to help support economic transformation around the country. We announced a commitment of, I think it was $23 or $24 million to the South Kansas Coalition out of Wichita, which is focused on the development of space commerce in that region. That's the sort of work that no one really thinks about the federal government doing, but we at Commerce want to drive economic growth and development. So it's not sort of the thing that I suspect most people think about. They think about Office of Space Commerce, or they think about NASA, but economic growth only happens if we do this in a concerted fashion.
So I want to pull forward our discussion on supply chains a little bit. Resilient supply chains and efficient supply chains are critical to U.S. competitiveness and global leadership. Key to that is critical manufacturing. And can you tell us a little bit about the department's work on supporting and strengthening supply chains, not only with domestic manufacturing, but with allied manufacturing?
We know that we're in a really difficult time as it relates to supply chains. The pandemic has exacerbated the challenges that we were already seeing with just-in-time delivery, with access to critical materials, components, and the like. So we've spent the last year and a half focused on getting our arms around what's the biggest challenge related to supply chains, providing industry with updated information on specific and critical parts of our supply chain, especially those areas that are serving as choke points. To your question, on the manufacturing side, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology really is the nation's, the federal government's manufacturing hub. So we have our manufacturing extension partnership with facilities in every state in Puerto Rico. where we're supporting the growth of manufacturing. In fact, we've seen over the course of since the president's term began, 660 or 670,000 new manufacturing jobs created. But that can only continue if we make sure that we, as I said, have our arms around supply chains. So we're spending a lot of time working with our partners and allies, identifying opportunities to invest more in supply chains, support, again, the growth of industry, and ensure that we aren't reliant on adversaries, especially in those areas that are critically important to many of the industries here in the conference.
Absolutely, and passage and the President's signature on the CHIPS Act and supporting the semiconductor industry, especially in Ohio and with Intel and Samsung and TSMC, right, will go a long way to relieving, over a course of time, some of the supply chain challenges that we have. I wanted to talk a little bit about trade, travel, and tourism. So Secretary Raimondo released the department's new national strategy on supporting one of the most hard-hit industries of the pandemic, with the goal of attracting 90 million new tourists to the United States. So it would estimate an additional 300 billion annually. Can you talk a little bit about the department's plan to work with the private sector to achieve this goal?
Well, as you pointed out, the national strategy, we think it's the first time this has been done in a number of years. We actually have a USG consolidated approach to supporting the travel and tourism industry. Absolutely devastated during the pandemic. The good thing is that between the American Rescue Plan, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the work that we're doing with the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as some programs that we have an ability to rehabilitate the travel and tourism industry. So that strategic plan is the start. But it only happens in reality when we engage industry, when we engage with communities. So we've been talking to the hospitality industry. We've been talking to the airlines. We've been talking to many of your companies to make sure that we are taking the right steps from a regulatory standpoint to make it easier to do business, that we're investing in the right ways to support the growth of the industry. We're also working with the State Department and Department of Homeland Security because we know that the country's travel and tourism industry can only succeed if we bring more folks from abroad to the U.S. We know that it's been a challenge to get visas approved, so we're trying to streamline those visa applications to make sure that we get folks in the country spending money in our community. So there's a lot more work to do, but the Secretary and I are very focused on the travel industry.
Coming full circle to where we started in the excitement and public interest in the aerospace and the space industry, we've talked about a number of the issues. What have we missed, and where do you hope we are as a nation in a year's time, in 5 years' time?
Well, the most important things that we can do is, one, provide reasonable, sensible guidance to industry, and then get out of the way to the extent that we can. We also need to support small and mid-sized enterprises. It's what we're doing and working with our partners across the federal government to grow these smaller, innovative firms in the industry. It's working to make sure that we have more commercial launches here in the U.S., that we're attracting foreign investment, which we've been doing through Select USA. We've seen investments from the UK and Japan in the U.S. directly as a result of those efforts. But again, it's that sensible, reasonable approach to operating principles around the regulatory environment. It's listening to you all, making sure that we are developing these in the right way, and making sure that we're working closely across the interagency. Because if we go one direction, NASA goes in a different direction, Department of Transportation is also not aligned, then it's going to make it really difficult for industry to know which direction to go, particularly as we are driving SSA and STM. It's why we have to rely on you all, and it's why we've been working so closely with industry and having ongoing engagement. We want to hear from you if there are challenges. As I said, we are your advocate and your partner, so we stand ready to listen.
Deputy Secretary Graves, thanks so much for being here today. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank him. Thank you very much.
Thank you.